All right, so get ready because we're about to dive into some seriously fascinating ideas
Yeah.
about faith
Yeah.
finances. And get this, the power of connection.
Interesting.
And all of this is coming from a perspective that you might not expect. We're going deep into this source called podcast23.pdf.
Oh.
It's a Christian devotional, so, that whole thing about achieving financial well-being. And look,
Yeah.
I know the evangelical angle might not be for everyone,
Yeah.
but trust me on this, there are some really interesting points here
Yeah.
that I think go beyond any specific belief system.
You know what struck me right away?
What's that?
It's how this devotional connects things that you usually wouldn't think of together.
Like what?
Spirituality, money, and our relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, it's suggesting a whole new perspective.
Yeah, no, it definitely got my attention too. It's like there's this whole part about how isolation can actually be deadly. They even talk about Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The text actually highlights some research, and it indicates that people who are isolated are, get this, 2 times more inclined to die
Wow.
compared to those who have strong social connections.
Really?
And it's not just some spiritual idea either. This is like backed by science. They even say that some people with really unhealthy habits end up outliving others just because they have better social lives.
It's funny because you hear those stories about people who smoke and drink their whole lives, but they live to be 100.
Right.
Maybe it really is all about relationships. But what kind of connections actually make a difference, and how do we even get those?
Well, that's where this whole divine connection thing comes in. It's not just about having a ton of friends. It's more about being really intentional, and cultivating relationships that are positive, that support you, and that actually align with what you believe in.
So it's more about quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I can get behind that.
Right.
But this divine thing, does that mean this only applies if you're religious?
Not necessarily, no. Even if you're not coming from a faith-based perspective, the core message here, like being discerning about your relationships, that's relevant for everyone, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It even talks about seeking guidance to avoid and break negative connections. And I think that speaks volumes about the importance of emotional intelligence, We all need to recognize how different relationships affect us and then make choices about who we let into our lives.
Yeah, it's like weeding out those toxic relationships and focusing on the ones that actually help us grow.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But how does any of this connect to the whole financial side of things? That's what I'm really curious about.
Well, that's where the language gets really interesting. The whole approach is like, fight for your finances. It's almost like it's a spiritual battle or something. There's even this line that says, 2025 Uppercut Arise equips you for the combat of your faith, family, finances, and future.
Whoa, okay, that's intense. 2025 Uppercut Arise sounds like a superhero movie or something.
Right.
But what does it actually mean to fight for your finances in like a spiritual sense? Are we talking about praying for a lottery win?
No, not quite.
Okay,
It's more about using those spiritual tools,
Okay.
like prayer, to become more disciplined, to make smarter choices, and to get through those tough financial challenges, It's about making sure your financial goals actually line up with your values and asking for guidance to make them happen.
So the weapons are like discipline and perseverance.
Yeah, exactly. And also having faith that you can actually achieve financial well-being.
So it's more about battling yourself
Uh-huh.
than battling like outside forces.
Yeah.
Like fighting against those bad spending habits or those limiting beliefs.
Exactly.
Okay, I see that. That's actually pretty relatable, even if you're not a religious person.
Right. It's about your mindset and the choices that you're making.
I feel like the author, Pastor G, is really drawing a strong connection between our spiritual state and how successful we are with money.
Yeah.
He even includes these specific key prayers that are supposed to help us with both spirituality and finances.
Oh, interesting.
I have to admit, though, I'm a bit skeptical. Can prayer really help you get out of debt or get a better paying job?
Well, that's a really great question, and it's one that we're going to dig into deeper as we explore those key prayers,
Right.
It's important to understand how they're meant to be used and what kind of impact they're supposed to have.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack those prayers and see if we can find some wisdom there. I'm ready to dive into the spiritual side of finances.
Let's do it. Welcome back. So before the break, you were wondering if prayer can actually make a difference in something as practical as our finances.
Right. It's one thing to pray for peace or guidance, but can you really just pray your way out of debt or into a better job?
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems a little out there even for someone who believes in prayer.
I hear you. It's easy to think of prayer as something passive, but this devotional really frames it as an active way to change yourself and your life, Like, it's about aligning your intentions with your actions, with your mindset, all towards your goals.
So it's not about asking for a handout from a higher power.
No.
It's more about asking for the strength and the wisdom to make changes in your own life.
Exactly. Like, look at prayer number 3. Pray and release yourself from every trap of the enemy in this season in the name of Jesus. Now, in a financial context, that could mean like recognizing and breaking free from bad spending habits, getting out of debt, or even steering clear of those get-rich-quick schemes.
Oh, yeah, the ones that promise you the world.
Yeah, exactly. So you're praying for discernment to see those traps and the willpower to avoid them.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But what about the things that are outside of our control? Like when you lose your job or get hit with unexpected medical bills.
That's where prayer number 10 comes in. Pray that the Lord will give you the strength to fulfill your destiny despite the forces of darkness. See, this is suggesting that even when stuff happens that we can't control, we can still tap into an inner strength to get through those challenges. It's about building resilience and really believing that you can reach your goals even when things get tough.
It's almost like these prayers are less about asking for something and more about shifting your perspective,
Yeah.
Instead of feeling helpless when you're facing money problems, it's like you're being encouraged to fight back both spiritually and practically. I'm starting to see how this whole spiritual warfare thing could be motivating, even if you're not religious.
Right. It's interesting because the devotional uses really strong language, but the main message is about taking control of your finances and not letting circumstances control your future. It's about believing that there's enough out there, even when you're feeling scarcity.
It's like cultivating a mindset of abundance. It's also interesting how the devotional brings up that idea of divine connection again. It's not just about connecting with a higher power, but also about surrounding yourself with supportive people.
Yeah.
And, going back to that research about isolation shortening lifespans, it makes you think about how important community is, especially when you're dealing with financial issues.
Absolutely. When we have a solid support system, it can make such a big difference in how we handle difficult times. It's about having people you can trust, people you can ask for advice, and people who will encourage you to stay focused on your goals.
It's almost like those connections become a source of strength and accountability. You're not fighting for your financial well-being alone. It's like having a whole team in your corner. And that adds a whole other layer to this spiritual warfare idea. But what about the practical nuts and bolts stuff? Does the devotional give any actual strategies for managing money?
That's a great question, and one that we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive. While the devotional really highlights the spiritual side of finances, it does offer some practical advice for things like managing money, budgeting, and making smart investments.
Okay, I'm all ears. Always looking for tips to improve my financial literacy. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the spiritual side of managing money, that whole divine connection idea, and even those key prayers for financial well-being. But I'm ready to get practical now. What actual advice does this devotional give?
I think you'll be surprised. It's actually pretty grounded. While the devotional focuses a lot on the spiritual foundation, it also recognizes that you need to have those sound financial practices in place too.
So it's not all about just praying your way to riches. There's actual budgeting and stuff like that involved.
Oh, absolutely. It actually encourages people to seek out advice from those who know what they're doing, like financial advisors. It goes back to that whole divine connection idea. That can also mean finding mentors or advisors who share your values and can help you make smart decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, prayer and positive thinking are great, but sometimes you need someone who really understands investing and taxes and all that to help you navigate those things.
Exactly. And while the devotional doesn't get into specific budgeting methods, it really emphasizes the importance of being responsible with your money. Like, it encourages you to see your finances not just as your own possessions, but as resources that you're entrusted with.
So it's about being mindful of how you're spending and saving, not just for yourself, but for like a greater good.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, right? It's not just about accumulating wealth. It's about using your resources in a way that's responsible and ethical.
It's like a more holistic view of financial well-being. It's not just about how much money you have, but your mindset, your relationships, and your purpose too.
Exactly. This devotional is all about looking at your finances not as something stressful, but as a tool for personal growth and making a positive difference.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What can they learn from this, even if they don't necessarily agree with the spiritual side of things?
I think the biggest takeaway is that connection between our spiritual lives, our relationships, and our finances. The devotional suggests that they're all linked, and to really thrive, we need to look at all of them.
It's about finding that balance, where financial responsibility and spiritual fulfillment meet. And even if the divine connection idea isn't for everyone, the message of seeking support, building strong relationships, and using your resources for good is something we can all apply to our lives.
Absolutely. Regardless of your beliefs, here's something to think about. If divine connections can help you live a more fulfilling life, how can you create those connections in your own way?
Maybe it's about reconnecting with an old friend, joining a group, or just being more present with the people you care about. Whatever it looks like for you, I think it's worth exploring. Maybe strengthening those connections will lead to a richer, more meaningful life, both financially and spiritually.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into faith and finance. It's been a really interesting conversation, and we hope you've gained some new insights along the way.